Hey, this is Jay.
And this is Chelsea.
Welcome to the Shifting Perceptions podcast.
We are bringing you inspiration to live a more creative lifestyle because our favorite people are the ones that choose the path less traveled. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of the Shifting Perception podcast. This is Chelsea. This week, we sat down with fine artist Chet Zar. Chet has garnered a legion of fans from his fine art paintings of dark and surreal creatures. We sat down with him this week to find out what his inspiration is behind his monster art and how he keeps such a positive attitude while immersed in a world that many people would be and are fearful of. Starting his career in the film industry, Chet's talent for creating special effects and doing makeup led him to work on major Hollywood productions such as The Ring, Hellboy 1 and 2, Planet of the Apes, and critically acclaimed music videos for the band Tool. Disillusioned with the politics and artistic compromises he felt he was having to make in his career, at age 33, Chet left the movie industry behind to follow his bliss. Chet is quite possibly one of the most philosophical and empathetic people that we have had the pleasure to chat with. An incredibly emotive artist, there is something extraordinary in the way that he uses his artistic outlet to work through emotions and emotional trauma. Rather than shying away from societal fears, Chet art shines a light on them, showing people that they're not alone in their fears and anxieties. Chet is such a great example of what it means to really shift your perceptions within an industry. We hope you are incredibly inspired to shift your own.
Hey everyone, this is Jay Alders. I really love getting into these artsy topics. This is going to be an episode that I think you'll really enjoy, even if you're not an artist or not into art. There's a lot of really great lessons and takeaways from this. Before we get into that, a couple super quick things. I released a new print today, a new limited edition print. The title is Sea Prints. Prints like Purple Rain Prints. I painted this on stage at the Stone Pony with my really talented friend Quincy Mumford. We were doing a show to raise money for Mary's at the Sea, a nonprofit to help women with cancer, and this limited edition signed print is now available on my website. If you're not familiar with my art, it's very much inspired by outdoor lifestyle activities, ones that I love, surfing and yoga and rock climbing, and also things of great beauty like chicks in bikinis and sunrises. And I have a sale just for you guys, just for our listeners. If you use the coupon code SHIFT2019 at checkout from now through the end of May 2019, you'll get 15% off matted prints, posters, and apparel. So check that out before it expires. And a little shout of love to my co-host and wife, Chelsea. Chelsea is a birth doula, and she's been cranking out these amazing blogs on her website, ommamasdoulas.com. So if you or someone you know is pregnant or thinking about procreating, you might want to check out her website. She is a birth doula, and she's just amazing at what she does. So check her out, ommamasdoulas.com. Stick around until the end. We have some commentary at the end of the episode. And if you'd like some visuals while you're listening, go to Instagram and check out Chet Zar, ChetZar.
Let's jump in.
What's up, man? Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it a lot.
My pleasure. How are you doing?
We're doing pretty good, man. It's a kind of a gray day here in New Jersey. You're out on the west. I'm sure it's sunny and perfect, right?
No, it's actually kind of gray, which is the way I like it.
Okay.
I enjoy it that way.
I'm kind of like that, too. I do like sunshine, but I really like when it's kind of gloomy out because it gives me an excuse to kind of stay in and paint and not feel like I'm missing out on anything.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I've always enjoyed that kind of weather. Something about it just feels good to me.
Yeah.
It's calming.
I'm excited to talk to you for a lot of reasons. Like being a fellow artist, I want to dive into all kinds of nerdy art questions and things. But so I found you online a couple of years ago, I guess it was, and I've been like following along in the sidelines, watching you do your thing, and I'm overly impressed with your work. But you paint a genre which you refer to as like dark art, which I admittedly know nothing about, but I'm still completely fascinated by your techniques as an artist, and you're business savvy, and so many of the things you do, even though I don't know much about your genre, I'm excited to talk about. And diving into some research on you even further, you seem like such a normal, like nice guy. I'm wondering where the dark monster stuff comes from, because I don't know much about it. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I've always been that way. It feels genetic, honestly, but I also have had my share of trauma in my early childhood
Okay.
with my family situation. So I think
Okay.
maybe I was sort of drawn to horror movies and horror comics and things like that because they were a way that I could sort of relate how I was feeling inside, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
at the time. I think that may be it, but it feels like part of who I am. Even as a little kid, I was drawing weird stuff, and I just loved monsters. And I kind of grew up in the 70s, and there was a lot of monster stuff back then, sort of a carryover from the 60s. Like the 60s were a big time for monster kids, they called them, where they marketed a lot of monster products. They re-released all the Universal horror movies, and so they were playing on TV like Frankenstein and Dracula and all that stuff, and there was a really big market for that, a lot of monster toys and monster models. And so I sort of caught the tail end of that because I was born in 67, and it just was part of my childhood growing up, and my parents never dissuaded me from it, so I just kept going with it.
That's so interesting because I was actually just thinking about this. My nieces were over and they have like a fascination with horror movies, but
Oh, cool.
it's not, I know, and they're only 12. Like we totally, now that we have kids, we just like totally think it's like abuse of some sort. It's so funny. We're like, what are you doing letting them watching these that like they watch the worst movies? But it's not as big of like when I was a kid, horror movies were such a big deal. And I'm sure you're like in that world, so you see it a lot. But I feel like as far as kids, like my kids don't have like scary monster movies. I mean, we watch like Marvel and we watch that kind of stuff. But as far as like actual, like like for me when I was growing up, it was like vampires and mummies and like I just felt like there was so much more of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the 70s was really kind of the 70s and 80s were when it like horror at its prime. I think starting with like The Exorcist. I mean, that was like seriously scary stuff.
That
back
stuff
then.
scared the crap out of me.
It still scares the
like,
crap out of him. Don't let him come.
It's scary. It still holds up.
like Poltergeist. That still gives me the
Yeah, that's a classic.
Oh my
you know?
God,
There's always been a need for that for whatever reason in human experience. I think like they in I forget when it was, like might have been the 1800s, the late 1800s. Have you ever heard of the Grand Guignol in France?
No. Teach us.
It was a theater, and they used to put on horror plays, and basically they were all about they're very lurid. They would have basically people being murdered on stage and their eyes being gouged out, and they'd have these really gory effects, and it was a huge thing at the time.
So what is it about humans that we like need this side of things? It's so interesting.
I know it is interesting. I it's all up for debate, I suppose, but I think that there's a lot of horror in life. You know, regular life is full of horror, real life horror, and I think that the horror played out in film or in comic books, they're a way for us to kind of confront, and in dark art particularly, it's a way for us to confront the real life horrors in a way that's safe, maybe.
Yeah.
Where you're not actually confronting the thing, but you are confronting the thing that you're afraid of happening, maybe in your subconscious.
Yeah, so just taking it on instead of waiting to wonder what that is. It's like, let's just bring it out.
Because the worst thing you can do, really, I think, is not acknowledge your shadow side or your fear and keep that hidden and keep it pushed down. That's when it causes problems, when you try and deny that this thing exists inside of you. So on this kind of spiritual level, I think that dark art is really about integrating the shadow side of ourselves in a way that's healthy instead of a way that's, insane.
So do you feel like if you didn't get into art, you would manifest this into another way? Like you'd be some creepy guy like gouging birds' eyeballs out?
I don't know, because I've always been a really, ever since as long as I can remember, my whole family's like this. I've always been a huge animal person.
Yeah.
Like I love animals so much.
Love them. Okay. I wanted to figure out what kind of animal person you were.
I would, my friends would shoot birds with BB guns, and I would just cry because I couldn't take it because it hurt so much to see. But I'm sure I'd be a much more disturbed personality if I didn't have this outlet.
What I'm fascinated by here in some of the things you mentioned, and then reading some of the interviews I saw with you online, you had in opening this conversation up, mentioned about how you had some trauma, anxieties, and I think even in your online bio, you mentioned about that from your childhood. And I relate so deeply to that. I had a lot of traumas and anxieties and depression and stress as well. My mom has bipolar. That's really hard to deal with. I think I would say I wouldn't say I think I actually know I've dealt with depression and anxiety my whole life, and so
most people do.
Yeah, it is true, and I feel like so in looking at my childhood drawings, I drew a lot of really, kind of horrific stuff that should have landed me in a therapist chair, but it didn't because I was the weird art kid, so it was just accepted, right?
Me too.
And so I feel like for my own career in art, I think things for me didn't really start to happen until I pushed away like the dark stuff and I started exploring like the more loving things, the more inspiring things in a lighter sense. Once I started doing that, my career started to take off, and I'm fascinated because you mentioned earlier about the spiritual side of things. Where do you stand on that spiritual side of manifesting where your mind goes? Like if you're creating these dark things, do you believe that creates more of it, or where's your stance on that?
Well, that's interesting because before I didn't start painting until I was 33. I made the decision I was going to get. I was in effects. I had a full-on career as a sculptor and a creature designer in effects, makeup effects industry for movies and stuff. So yeah. I kind of got burnt out on that and decided to become a fine artist at age 33. However, during the whole time I was working in the film industry, I was trying to make a career as a musician, and I had bands. I had these punk bands and stuff that I was playing in, and I was really into music, songwriting and all that. And I was always trying to put the positive spin on everything. It was all about trying to be positive and make this positive change in the world. And then I started having trouble in my marriage, and I ended up having to go to therapy because I was so damaged. And once I got into therapy, I started realizing after therapy, there's me before therapy and me after therapy. And after therapy, I sort of started embracing this dark thing and realizing that it can be a positive thing just as much as anything else can be a positive thing. It's really kind of your intention behind it. And after therapy, I started getting back into my own personal art and drawing, and it was always these creatures and stuff. And so anyway, get to age 33 when I decided to be a painter. I initially was like, okay, what am I gonna do here to be an artist? Okay, I'm gonna test this Joseph Campbell follow your bliss theory, because I've always believed in that theory that if you follow your bliss, what's the quote? Doors will open where they were previously closed or whatever. And like kind of this cosmic thing will happen and you'll find your true path. So I thought, okay, what's my bliss? My bliss would be painting monsters. And that is so unlikely to be able to make a career out of that if it works, then that will sort of prove the theory to me and prove it to other people that it's a real thing. So I was like, okay, even though this is totally weird, there's no market. There's no market for this at all. This is like 2000. I'm going to do it. And if it works, then this will prove the theory. So I started painting monsters, and I felt like guilty at first. Like, am I just inflicting my own trauma onto other people? And I had a lot of guilt about it. But I kept doing it because that was what I wanted to do. That's what I loved. That's what I was passionate about. And as time went on, I started noticing that it started catching on, and people really liked it. And people were coming to me and saying that they could relate to the feelings that they were seeing in this artwork, and it was having a positive effect on them. And I'm also not just doing this straight up horror stuff. Like I do some stuff that's dark and scary and creepy. Most of it really has a sense of kind of this sadness.
Yeah.
Like I'm really trying to create a sense of empathy for most of these characters I'm painting. So it's not necessarily what it seems on the surface. So I don't know. I see it as totally the opposite of what a person who maybe isn't familiar with it might think, which is that it is positive. It's positive in a way that I don't know, like a a song about heartbreak is positive.
That's what I was just thinking. There's something to be said for like being able to have this relatable emotion towards something that, even if it's dark, it's like, well, at least you put it into words,
Right. And it's a way for me to maybe as a fan or a listener of a song like this, it's a way for me to feel like I'm not so alone in feeling this way. And that's a positive. That's important. That like connects people. It makes them feel like they're not alone in feeling bad, and everybody feels bad.
So I would imagine that like opens you up to like with your fans. Are you, I feel like you're putting yourself in a really vulnerable place for people to just give you their whole darkness. Like, do you find that?
Well, that's the weird thing too. That I think kind of points to the fact that I'm doing the right thing and I'm on my true path, because I get almost no haters. I get almost no real weirdos or like psychos. I mean, there's been a couple times, of course. I think that, if you're doing this kind of work, you're going to attract that crowd to some degree, but it's like minuscule. 99% of my fans are just the coolest people. It's weird. It's like that's why I started trying to kind of like do this podcast, this Dark Art Society podcast, and try and promote this concept of dark art and educate people about it, because it's the kindness of the fan base is so unusual. I don't see it in any other crowd. It's like they're exceptionally empathetic. Most or many of them are, vegetarians like myself, or vegans because they're animal lovers.
We're vegans too.
Yeah, we're vegans.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
That's great.
I actually want you to give like a loose definition, since you are running this podcast and you're kind of taking ownership over that dark arts thing. Why don't we give a loose definition to our readership just about like what exactly that encapsulates? Because for me, like we are like very sunshine and rainbows over here. We like ocean and bright colors and all of that. And so I think it's like a really broad thing. Like people are obsessed with like everything from like vampires and Game of Thrones all the way to like monsters. And so what do you see as that encapsulating?
I haven't found a little sentence to sum it all up yet. But to me, it has to convey a sense of mystery. I mean, it's dark. It is a very wide umbrella. Like I think on one end, maybe I might say the low end, it's just pure gore and horror. I mean, that is part of it.
Yeah.
But it's a tiny part of it. I think the kind of at its best, it has a sense of mystery. It confronts death a lot, which is a very real concern for everybody that's willing to admit it. It's going to happen to everybody, and we have to deal with it in some way.
Yeah.
So it's often about death. It's often about fear. But the range is wide. It can be very superficial. But I guess what I'm trying to do in promoting the concept is to say that really it can be as deep and as important as any other genre of artwork. I mean, it goes back to Hieronymus Bosch and Goya. I mean, these were legitimate artists that were definitely painting dark art.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Giger is, of course, probably the big grandfather of our current age. H.R. Giger, the guy who designed Alien.
Yeah.
And if you look at his work, it's legit. It's incredible. It's very deep. So I don't have a clear-cut answer for you there, but
no, I like the understanding of what it encapsulates, though. I think it's good for people to understand that, you might be on the fringes of that and not even realize it with the things that you relate to and you love, and that, it's like what you said, like not everyone just listens to happy music all day. Like something about dark, sad music makes us feel good. So
yeah, or angry music. A lot of people are into metal or punk, and it's like I remember. I'm more into like punk of my era during the 80s, and I remember listening to, I always talk about this band No Means No because nobody knows about them, and they're like one of the most amazing bands in the world. And I remember listening to it. It's very aggressive, very angry, but very intellectual as well. And I remember being so frustrated at my job in effects and listening to, and just frustrated with the world, basically. You know how you get, sometimes you feel that frustration of people are stupid. And someday everybody feels that way sometimes. And I remember listening to that and feeling so grateful. Like, I forget what the song was, but feeling like, oh, this person feels the same way. It makes me feel so much better that I know that I'm not crazy. Someone else feels this way too. Something is wrong in the world. And it just makes me feel better knowing that I'm not the only one that feels that way. I think that's really at the root of a lot of dark art, as well, is that there is so much wrong in the world. Yeah. There's so much bad in the world. And it's like, there's running away from that is not going to make it go away, and neither is wallowing in it. But, there's a place for it in culture, I think.
So I have a theory / question here. So since we all admitted we're all vegan, animal lover, hippy dippy people, yep. So is there something to the theory that you being an artist and you not turning your head towards death and darkness and things that are uncomfortable, is there a correlation there for you that you also chose to live authentically by saying, hey, I love animals, I don't think I need to contribute to their torture, death, or any other sort of negative thing? I did it. So is it sort of like, hey, I can't unsee the truth and I have to expose it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is a connection. I haven't even never thought of that before, but that's a good point. I'll tell you quickly how I became a vegetarian, vegan. I'm like, I'm practically a vegan, but every once in a while I'll eat cheese. But
you're like, every once in a while I'll eat a raw cow.
Yeah. No. I haven't eaten any meat except fish once in a while for, 30 something years. I started in. I stopped eating meat when I was 18, and I never went back. But what happened was, I was, all my life I was very much into animals. I just loved animals so much, and I think part of it is because I didn't. There was so much trauma in my family, and everyone was kind of disconnected because there was just big problems with everyone in the family. And I was like left. I felt like left on my own. I was the youngest, and I didn't know what was going on, other than I had no one to connect with anymore. I was alone because everyone else was like fighting, right? So to me, I was able to find I guess love in the pets I had and the animals. That was the only place I could go to feel like that feel like how you feel when you pet a cat or a dog. It's like you feel a connection, you feel love. But anyway, so I grew up like that. My sister was a vegetarian since she went to a dairy farm when she was 9 years old. So it's definitely, my mom's an animal lover. But anyway, I was 18. I had just started experimenting with LSD and had these amazing experiences, spiritual experiences. I kind of took it, I felt, for the right reason, and I had, the big God moment. But at the end of one of these trips, me and a friend of mine we're just wandering around San Pedro, where I grew up, and we walked into this grocery store, and I looked up, and we were standing in front of the meat section, and I looked up, and there was a big mural of meat, like they had put giant photos of meat up there. And I just sat there and I was looking at it, and I don't know if you've tripped or not, but you at the tail stage of it, you kind of get in this really philosophical state of mind, and you can really think clearly about things. And I was looking at it, and I was going, that looks exactly like all of this corpse reference I have been using while working on this movie called The Blob. It was the first movie I ever worked on.
Yeah.
And we had to make disgusting blob victims. And so we had these books of medical books of cadavers.
Oh my God.
All cut apart. And I was like, that looks exactly like a human cadaver. And at that point I was like, I can't do it anymore. I've been kind of like lying to myself that it's okay, because I was a huge meat eater. Like I said, I grew up in the 70s, working class. All you ate was meat, crappy processed meat. That was it. Absolutely. And so it took me 3 tries, and I kept kind of going back because I really felt addicted to it. But third time's a charm, and I was able to do it, and I stuck with it ever
So it
since.
just took like a good acid trip and a meat market, and you were good to
Yep.
go. Okay.
Exactly.
There you go, kids.
That's how you do it.
All right. Well, so I know Jay really wants to dive into just your technique because it's phenomenal, and that's like where he
Thanks.
nerds out the best. But do you have a question for him on that, on just where you started? So do you think the makeup stuff is really where you like perfected, or do you feel like the painting, like what has changed?
That's a great question, because I remember, I started doing makeup when I was a kid because I was into movies and how special effects were made. When I was 12 years old, I started messing around with makeup, doing cuts and burns and all that sort of thing.
Wait, I have to pause you right there for a second. So you were like the kid drawing like zombies and monsters and then playing with makeup. Like, did you just get tortured as a kid? Like, I feel like
Did I get what?
tortured as a kid, or were your parents just totally worried?
Oh, no, they were totally into it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
You're like, Mom, can I borrow your mascara for a second?
Yeah, like
No,
I picture my kids
would-
with all of this. I'm like, oh my gosh, should we go to therapy?
I'd take her eyeshadow and I'd make bruises with it.
But you were probably really good at it. I guess that's what the difference is. Like, if you're really talented, they're like, okay, he's got something here.
Yeah, but my mom's side of the family, they all have a really weird sense of humor.
Okay.
I mean, my grandfather, and probably this is horrible, actually. It's like I laugh at it now, but it's actually very horrible. He was my mother's dad was kind of sadistic. Like, they were all into practical jokes, and he used to put on this caveman mask. I mentioned this in my documentary, I Like to Paint Monsters. I was probably 3 years old. It's insane. He would be babysitting us, me, my brother, my sister, and maybe a couple of my cousins. And he would put this caveman mask on and turn all the lights off in the house and chase us around in pitch blackness.
Do you just remember extreme terror? Like, we were just so scared.
Oh, it was so scary, but it was fun in a way. But So I think maybe that's where my wires got crossed, because it was the most terrifying thing you can imagine. A 3-year-old being chased by a guy. No,
my kids they'd be
my kids
I know.
Yeah, my kids freaked out when I put a Spider-Man outfit on.
They didn't forgive him. They didn't forgive him for like a year. They still say, "Dad, do you remember when you terrified us with the Spider-Man?"
Yeah, I know.
costume?
And I think of my kids, and and my grandkids now. I imagine doing that to them, and that would just be it's abuse for sure.
Yeah.
But he, it was like how we grew up, and that's how my my mom's side of the family was. He did that to them when they were kids. It was just kind of insane. But so my mom, she grew up in that environment, so she had a weird sense of humor. So I'd walk in and I'd hold my hand out to her and take a knife and cut my hand, and it would start bleeding, and she would like laugh.
Oh my god!
Because she knew what I was up to.
Oh,
So she would I'd make there'd be a chopped off finger in the kitchen or whatever, and she was just super supportive. She was amazing with that stuff. So I never got any grief for it from my family, which is I'm really fortunate.
That's cool. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So let's start with technique. I had to ask. It was
That's I'm sorry. So anyway, my background was makeup and prosthetics. I started making prosthetics, and all of that stuff was colored with grease paint, right? Old school grease paint, like stage makeup.
Okay.
And I used to paint that on, and I used to think, oh, it feels really good the way you paint that on. This is before I painted in oils, really. And then when I, years and years and years go by, I have a career in effects. I work on movies. I do makeups on set. I sculpt, blah, blah. Then I started painting in oils, and I'm like, this feels like grease paint. It's like the same kind of thing, except the difference is that grease paint doesn't dry and oil paint does. So I really feel like I had an edge because I was familiar with the feel of it, of painting some kind of paint on that's greasy and oily.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So, and not to mention, working in the effects business, it was like working in a fine arts, atelier, or however you say that, the fancy.
Yeah, totally.
Academy. And I never went to art school. So, I mean, there was life casts everywhere. So, that's how they study in those academies, they draw life casts. So there was all this reference, all anatomy reference everywhere. I mean, I learned color theory in effects, how to mix paints, how to sculpt, how things look in 3 dimensions. I was sculpting constantly. So I think I got it drilled into my head. how things look when they're lit and how shadows are cast and how reflected light comes up. So that definitely you know, transferred into my my painting, my oil painting, basically.
So Chet, so how does a guy with no formal training end up doing work for movies like Planet of the Apes, Hellboy, The Ring? Like, you've done some really big stuff. Like, how did you get to the point where these movie houses were like, sure, we'll hire you with no experience and no training?
Well, I started sculpting, and I knew I wanted around age 12. I saw Dawn of the Dead, which is the original one from 1978, and The Howling, which is an old movie from I think 1980 or something. And those had amazing makeup effects at the time. And I saw those and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I got to learn how to do this. And so I started teaching myself. I started, you know, this is back before the internet. I had to go to the library and get books on any book you could find on stage makeup or whatever, mask making. And I started teaching myself to do it. And I realized at a certain point, you know, I could do this for a living. This is what I want to do for a living. Subscribe to Fangoria magazine, Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. I was like totally into it. And I saw that there was people doing this for a living. So I started building a portfolio in high school. I started taking sculpting, painting masks and stuff, and taking photographs and putting them in a little book. So I knew that when I graduated high school, I could go, and since I lived in San Pedro, which is, you know, 45 minutes from Hollywood, I could kind of take my book around and show it around. And I eventually got the nerve up to show my portfolio at a few shops, and one guy ended up hiring me. And, you know, I got a little experience on my first film, and then I eventually got hired on The Blob, which was my first big film. And I kind of started on the bottom doing molds and just anything that needed to be done. And then they realized that they let me, for some reason, they let me sculpt a little maquette to design an effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I sculpted it, and they saw that I could, you know, I was good at it. And then for some reason they let me paint something with an airbrush, because I was all into airbrushing too, because I was doing that stuff all in high school. And then I became the painter on the film. So I painted pretty much all of the blob victims on that for the rest of the film. And then the guy who hired me, Tony Gardner, he kept me on for another 10 years as he built his company up. And I was kind of like his art lead. So, I mean, I kind of learned on the job, but I had done a lot of study on my own before him.
Okay.
High school stuff.
This is like a totally random question, but so I grew up with this one kid named Brian, and he was one of my like skateboard buddies down the street. And he was, as you're describing yourself, his name popped to my head, and I haven't thought about him in so long. But he was the weird guy doing monsters. And last I looked, I think it was on MySpace. I think he actually landed in the same industry. Do you by chance know Brian Dooley?
Oh yeah. I know I've met him. I can't think of his face, but I know his name.
Yeah,
like the makeup effects community is very small. Everyone kind of knows everybody else.
It's so random.
So yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah, I literally haven't thought about him in like, I don't know, 20 years. And he was like the kid that had the cool skateboard ramp. And as we both went to high school, he was like a year or two older than me. And he was like the artist in high school that did all the weird monstery stuff. And I was the artist that did, I don't know what I was doing, Army Guys or whatever the hell I was doing. I was painting
kids
skateboarders
from your high school that like are doing these
that's true. I think I was painting mostly like skaters and whatever, ninjas or whatever the hell I was doing. But that's really random. So
what a trip.
Yeah,
it's
for
a
real.
small business. It's a small business. Everybody knows each other.
Yeah. So that kind of got your feet wet in there. And then which of those mediums seemed like they really resonated with you the most? Because for a non-artist, maybe they just think artists can do anything, which on some level, maybe we can. Ha ha ha. Mm-hmm. But thinking in 2D terms with painting does require a different eye and does require different skills. Was painting or sculpture something a more? Which one is the way that you think more? Do you think more in 3D forms or more how light works?
Yeah, I probably think more in 3D forms. I kind of worked my way up to being a sculptor. That was sort of the highest place you can get in effects in a shop was sculptor. Those were like the elites. And so that's what I really wanted to be. And painting was sort of like, you know, just something I could do, and I would do it when I needed to do it. but I ended up kind of being primarily known as a sculptor. So, which is great experience because it's 40 hours a week sculpting, it's sculpting all kinds of things, gorillas, humans, monsters, wounds and prosthetics, old people. So, I was primarily a sculptor, but I also had this, drawing and background in drawing. So I could design creatures in 2D. And I don't know, when I first decided I got to get out of the industry, I want to be a fine artist. I wanted to be a sculptor actually. And so I thought, I could do these sculptures I'm doing for these movies. And most of the movies end up sucking after I put so much effort and time into it. And it was really frustrating me. So I'd always think, man, if this work we're doing for films was presented as fine art, it's really all about the context you're presenting it that makes it fine art in a way. Cause the guys the place I was working, Rick Baker's, was probably the best shop I ever worked at. He's like a Academy Award winning effects guy. The level of work, these guys were the top notch artists, like fine artists. They were amazing, but they're doing stuff like, fat suits and,
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy and Nutty Professor and, the Grinch and stuff like that. But I was thinking, man, if you kind of like did a surrealist twist on this and made the sculpture the same quality as is in the film industry and presented it as fine art, it'd be amazing. And people, now people are doing that, but at the time it wasn't like a big thing. So I did this sculpture while I was working. I would work on it. It's called Soft Spot. I was working at lunch and after work, and I sculpted it, molded it, cast it, paint it, and it was so much work that I just thought, I'm not going to be able to make a living doing this. It's too expensive, takes too much time. So after I completed that sculpture, I thought I got to, try something else. So I tried painting in oils, and I was like, okay, I could paint in oils and, do a whole show in the time it took me to do that sculpture and mold it myself and all that. It cost almost no money really comparatively.
Which is so funny because I feel like people have to work up to oils, but because of the medium you were used to working in, you were like coming down from the other direction into oils, and it was easier.
Yeah. And I did start with acrylics first because, even though I used a lot of grease paint and stuff, eventually the industry graduated into using this stuff called Pax paint instead of grease paint, which is a acrylic paint mixed with a prosthetic glue. And that was like a better, it dried, so it wouldn't rub off. So a lot of stuff was painted with acrylic. So I was also very familiar with acrylics. So actually, when I first decided to be a painter, I was working on the movie Planet of the Apes, the Tim Burton remake. I was on set in the makeup trailer where I was in charge of repairing these chimp gloves during a huge fight scenes of all these chimps fighting. And so they'd come back and they'd be all torn up and I'd have to paint them. It was really like, it was so boring.
Yeah, it sounds tedious as hell. Yeah.
Tedious and boring. And when something's ripped, you can never make it look as good as it was. And you have to just work with it. So, and it also, you're on set for 12 hours a day. And most of the time you're not doing anything. You might work 2 hours of that day. So I was sitting there. I had my sketch pad because I always had a sketch pad with me. And I had all these acrylic paints to make my Pax paint to touch up the gloves. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try painting a little 5x7 pad of paper. If I can paint a little painting, then I'll be able to be a painter and I could do that for my fine art thing.
Nice.
And so I painted this painting and it looked really good. And I was like, okay, I can do this. Cause I had never really tried to do it as, I'd painted here and there throughout my life, but nothing to where I was very serious about it. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And that was kind of the moment I realized I'm going to be a painter. And so I thought I wanted to do paint in oils because all of my favorite painters like Beksinski and Frank Frazetta and all the people that influenced me were oil painters. So I don't even remember how I learned. I kind of taught myself. And my dad was an oil painter too. So I did have very basic knowledge about using mediums and stuff. So I just, went through that awkward stage of learning how to use oils. And once I figured it out, I just kept painting with it and never went back to acrylics after that.
So Jay, I take my sleep very seriously. You know that.
I know this.
Yes.
This is true. You don't mess with Chelsea's sleep.
And here's the thing is that I'm a birth doula. So it's actually kind of funny because
You don't get much sleep anyway.
I don't get any sleep. It's really kind of crazy. The game changer for me for getting back into a really good sleep cycle has been
Dun, dun, dun.
CBD oil, for
You
sure.
down with CBD?
So Jay did some due diligence and found a absolutely well-known, actually, right? And
Very
phenomenal
well-known
brand.
company that decided to actually partner with us, which we're excited about.
Super excited. And
Charlotte's Web.
what a better fit for our first full-time affiliate, right? Like full
Yeah,
on.
we're both stoked. We've been using CBD for, I don't know, like half a year or a year.
Probably
long
coming
time.
up to a year, yeah. But it actually gets me like really back into the exact flow of sleep that I need.
And I use it to not be such a stressful husband. As you can tell, it does actually help, though. I have a lot of everyday stress from work and from being a dad, and I find that it does kind of take the edge off.
Yeah, so we've got some links and some codes for you guys.
Yeah, so if you guys are interested in checking out Charlotte's Web CBD, you can go to jalders.com/CBD. That's going to get you 10% off everything except for the bulk and the original. And we have to say this, and I'm saying this in italics, that everything we've said has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. And none of this is intended to diagnose, treat, or cure, or prevent any diseases. So we are not doctors. We don't play them on the podcast. Once again, that's jalders.com/CBD. Don't forget to use code ALDERS for 10% off. That's spelled ALDERS. So talk about growing up with your stepdad, James. So was that a career that was just meant to be just from being around it? Or did you, like you said, you went to music first, you said. Was that to kind of avoid his shadow?
You know, it was weird. That was a weird thing. Like it was definitely, it felt cosmic that he came into my life, because my biological dad, he had really bad, like he was bipolar and he had depression, and my parents split up when I was like 5 years old, and he so there was like a really, you know, and all the fighting between my brother and my sister and my mother, and there was a really like a darkness in that house growing up for a period of time. And then Jimmy, my stepdad, came in. My mom connected with him. They were high school sweethearts, and they broke up when he went away to college, and she married my dad, and you know, all that happened. But he came back, and he was such like a positive, uplifting personality. He was very outgoing and upbeat and funny. So it just immediately changed the whole vibe of the house. And the weird thing about it, though, was like years before I met him, I already knew I was an artist, and that was what I wanted to do. And so then all of a sudden my mom remarries, and this guy's an artist. And so it wasn't like that really even affected me that much, because I already knew I was an artist. You know, I was already drawing and painting. I remember being in the first grade fantasizing about when I would grow up and be a painter, like standing in an easel, like it was the coolest thing. And so it just seemed natural that he was an artist also. And he was he was super open. His studio was in our den. I could always walk in and just look at what he was doing. And, you know, I never asked a lot of questions. Because I'm just an independent kind of person, and I learn by watching and learning myself. I just feel like I got to learn things my own way. And so I just growing up around it definitely had an effect on me. There was always art on the walls, and he was painting every single day of his life. So that was just like a normal thing. And I think he just kind of absorbed that. But the music thing was, I just loved music, and I learned I taught myself how to play guitar at like 17 or 16, taught myself a few chords, and I got really into songwriting. And then I got in a band, and it was just so much fun that just kind of derailed me a little bit for a few years, because it was just fun. I just did it because it was super fun.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, had nothing to do with that. I never felt any kind of competition with him or even following in his footsteps in a way. It was more like I already was kind of on my path by then.
Well, so I want to jump in from this point in your career. Jay was saying, and I didn't have a chance to dive into it, but that you've had a lot of luck with Patreon, which we've sort of like delved into a little bit, but definitely not gotten to that space. So talk a little bit about what that has looked like for you. Like, has this been a big part of your niche that you were like, it really is helping you connect to fans?
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I think it's the future because it's basically getting your most hardcore fans and then telling them, look, I'll show you everything I'm working on and you pay me $1 a month or $3 a month or $5 a month. Or, I've got different tiers. Like I've got monthly tutorials for $10 a month, which is, I'm basically teaching everything I know. And it's been incredible. It's hard to get people over there because people aren't used to paying for content.
Yeah.
Even $1, it seems weird. It took me a year before I considered even doing it. And, but now I've got steady income every month I can count on. So that makes a huge difference in my life. Full-time art, it's crazy. Every month I'm hustling to make money when the bills come due. And now I know I at least have this money here that's coming in, and people are into it. People seem really into it. The trick though is getting people over there and promoting it. And, you have to I think you have to have a big following on social media.
Yeah. To convert them basically.
Yeah. Cause only a tiny percentage are going to follow you over there.
So that's interesting. So you don't have anyone really that that's what I always wonder with that platform is people aren't just sitting on Patreon looking for things that they're interested in.
It's not a discovery platform. They say that straight out.
Yeah.
They say that it's a platform where you can show your stuff and charge your fans for work and rewards and stuff. They say explicitly you have to bring people over there.
Right.
So, I've got over 100,000 followers on Instagram that I didn't pay for. It was all organically over the years before they started putting the algorithm in. And I've gotten 222 people over there so far. So It's like a tiny amount.
Yeah. So seeing what that conversion is, but then that's also, we always talk about that, all you need is 1,000 true fans, right? And so that's also showing you who your true participants are.
Yeah. And it's like it kind of separates the casual fan from the hardcore fan, I think, because I think I support a bunch of them on there too. Since I got on, I figure I better walk the walk if I'm going to get people to come over there. So I've got I'm supporting 70 of them on there.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Anybody I know, it's like any artist who's trying to do it, I throw $1 a month at them,
Right. I have so many questions on this. So Chelsea's been up my ass about this, trying to just,
that's why I'm tell us more, Chet.
Yeah.
So I guess, so the first thing
away.
I'll ask for me, as well as for our fellow artists listening, are there other business models with this that you explored? Would it make more sense? And I have no idea the answer. Would it make more sense to sell videos for $29 on your website instead of churning out these things, hoping to get $1 or $5 or $10? Have you thought about other business models to distribute the content?
Yeah. I mean, there's a thing called Skillshare that's kind of like that. And there's another one too, where it's you upload videos and people rent them or buy them. The thing is, you could do that on Patreon also if you want. Patreon is like this. It's whatever you make it, sort of. I mean, if you wanted, you could. Some people have a Patreon with a tip jar, and that's it. No tiers, no levels. They just say pay what you want, and some people make that work. And some people say $1 only. Some people say $5 and up. And that's what's kind of cool about it, because you can do things that have never been done before. It's all up to your creativity and how you market and how you come up with ideas of things to do. Some guy up there, I've seen a guy who has a Patreon that says, I do nothing. His whole Patreon is that he doesn't do anything, and people are supporting him.
Good God,
20
really?
followers on there.
Oh my God. So,
but
How does this impact you as far as being like Chet, the guy that just wants to lock his door, keep everyone away from me? I just want to paint. Like, I don't know if that's even a side of you, but for me, I love painting because it's not the place where I invite people in. Like, I have
totally.
I have a public persona. You do too. But like my art studio, I like to keep kind of like my bathroom. Like, just get away from me. I'm doing my thing, you know?
Right.
So how do you deal with those? How do you reconcile that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I feel like the people that are on my Patreon it almost feels like they're friends of mine. So I don't mind letting them in. I am very like totally into I'm really comfortable being alone. I'm really into the solitude of the studio and painting alone, putting a movie on and painting. It's like heaven to me.
Yep.
But lately I have been experimenting with live streaming to where I just point my phone at what I'm painting and just let people watch and comment and talk to each other and ask me questions. And it's a little bit invasive. I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it makes it hard to concentrate sometimes. So
yeah,
I have to find like a balance, like maybe once a week I could do something like that.
Okay.
And, there's technical difficulties. Like, it's easier just to start painting whenever you want and stop whenever you want and start whenever you want, as opposed to having a camera that's filming a time lapse that you got to remember to stop and then start again and then put it together. There's that's a big part of what I'm doing on Patreon, is just showing these time lapses because they're relatively easy to do. I found this app called Snap. It's amazing. And you can stop and start your time lapses, and then it renders out a video for you. You could add music from it. It's really cool. It's really amazing. So I can do a time lapse and render it out, put music to it, and then upload it to upload it to YouTube, then upload that to Patreon, all from my phone, which is kind of handy.
Yeah. So which things are you finding most participation in on Patreon?
What do you mean?
So like people are funding and engaging in, like, is it like the educational pieces or like which sides?
Yeah, it's hard to say, really. It's weird because, I've got, like I said, I got a couple hundred people on there and I only get like, I don't know, 20 likes on a good post. That's the weird thing that's hard to get used to, because I get like 1,500 likes on an Instagram post.
Right.
Yeah.
As an average. And then all of a sudden you're like pouring your heart out. You're doing everything, showing everything, and you get like 5 likes on a post. It's like,
gee,
but then you gotta go, you know what? It's not about that.
Right.
A lot of people will donate just because they want to support you, and they're not really even going to check it that often.
Right.
Some people, I got a couple people that donate and they don't even take a reward. Like they don't choose it here because they just want an opportunity to support their favorite artist, which is super amazing. So that's another thing to consider, is if you don't have some kind of platform like that, no one's going to send you money.
Right.
But if you have that up there are some people, more than you might think, that just want to support you because they believe in what you're doing. And, it's like, there are people that are what's the word? They just want to contribute. They want to be part of it and just support you because they like what you're doing.
Yeah. So I guess related to this, but also outside of Patreon, how the hell do you prevent burnout? Because you're doing this really great podcast, the Dark Art Society podcast. You're doing the Patreon. You're doing art. You're teaching. I think it was a couple of years ago, I think I saw you were like doing a crowdsourced art exhibit. Like, you have your hands in so many things. You're doing so many things. And I would guess, and I could be wrong, that you're a one-man show like myself. How the hell do you just prevent, like, just pulling the hair out of your head and being like, aha!
Well, let's see. How do I do that? It is crazy. I mean, I'm trying to get out of that, to be honest, because when I started painting, I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this happen. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to do the 24-hour day. I'm going to, whatever I need to do. And so I just was relentless in pushing this thing because this is what I wanted to do with my life. And then I got to a point like, I'm going to die probably. Like, I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm working way too hard. So,
and then one of your followers will paint you dead.
Yeah, exactly. I've already painted myself dead before, actually.
God.
I did that because it seemed like a scary thing to do. And I was like, if it scares me, I should probably do it. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, I'm like, I got to put the brakes on this and slow down. And it's, I'm hoping by the end of this year that it'll be like 3 years since I decided to do that I'm going to be able to slow things down a little bit. But man, once you get the momentum going, it's really hard to stop it all, shows you've committed to and this and that. But what I usually do, I work too hard, I go too long, and then I get to a point where my body says, okay, you have to stop. And then I just take a day or two off and do nothing except watch movies on Netflix or something.
Yeah.
It's not the best way to do things, but I'm my kids are growing up. I've got all this freedom now, and my wife is super cool, and I work at home, and she basically lets me do whatever I want. There's no like, I don't know, we're both at an age where it's like, let's just do whatever we want. It's like we don't have kids around anymore. We don't have to worry about anybody else.
That is so crazy. So how old were you when you had kids?
I was 20, and I had a stepson who was already 5. My wife was 25. I was 20 when we got married, and then we had a kid soon after that.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was young. I was a young father, and we're still married.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
That's hard work to go from 20. It's a lot of phases to get through together.
Yeah. We went through a lot, but we made it, because we were committed to each other.
So doing all of these different things you're doing, it takes a lot of different sides of your brain. I still am trying to wrap my head around how you're able to produce so much artwork, because I know for me, I'm spending like exponentially more time marketing and dealing with my website and everything else that goes along with it, rather than having time to paint.
Right.
And then it seems often when I would like to be painting, I'm like, I want to paint, but I have all these other things to do. What does like a typical day or week look like for you that you're able to sort of juggle everything and make sure everything gets done?
It's I don't do it in the best way. I'm not an organized person. I'm really messy. I'm not good at organization. It's really, the way I do it is because I have no other choice. That's the truth. It's like I do what I have to do, and it's not usually not that fun. But I do have someone. My wife helps out with the business stuff, and I do have a friend of ours that comes in and works doing all my shipping and packing, which is amazing. That's been a huge help.
It's literally the same as us. That's
you have such a crazy parallel to my life right now. It's like shipping. Yeah.
Yeah, it's allowed me to grow my business. It's huge, and she's amazing, and she helps do castings and stuff. She's just great. And so I do have some help. I have some help with the podcast. I have Brian Kilgore does the audio for the podcast. He kind of donates his time, and he processes everything, the audio, and edits things together. And and I've got someone who's Jeff Bradford, Dark Art Society member, who's offered to help build the Dark Art Society website, which we're in the process of building. So I am starting to get help, reach out and get help. But I get up, I try and get up by 8. I really should be getting up at 6, but I try and get up, but I end up working till like 12:30. So what's happened lately, I get up at 8. It takes me a couple hours to wake up. I get, my assistant working and packing and stuff. Anything that she needs to know, I kind of let her know. Then I deal with emails and all the business crap. I print out labels for the packages that she packs. And then she leaves at noon, and I eat lunch, do my meditation for half an hour, and then the rest of the day is usually painting if I can. And often that doesn't start until like 3 or 4, so it ends up being like 5 to midnight, or 5 to 12:30, or 5 to 1. I'm a night owl, and I'm always fighting that. It's not. I'd be better if I was a morning person, but I'm just not.
I know Jay, actually at 6 o'clock, he's done. That's he's tapped. His brain can't go any further.
I'm totally a morning person.
The opposite.
Yeah, I wish I was a morning person. It would make my life so much easier. But man, ever since I was a little kid, I would stay up at night and make art, and it's just like the neural connections are just so deep.
I also just feel like it would be so weird to have the sunrise and a morning coffee, and then be painting what you paint.
Right.
It's like, it just belongs at the night, you know?
It's true. It is kind of true. It is kind of true. Although, I find inspiration in beautiful sunsets and trees and animals, and it's just like, I don't know. Inspiration comes from all the traditional places that inspiration comes for any other artist. But when I go to sit down and paint, that's what comes out for me.
It's so fascinating. You're so fascinating to me,
Chad.
Yeah,
Chad, I need to like understand more about your process here. So, okay, so the money thing, the grind, the reality of life, that's your motivation. I get that. But then you have the inspiration that you were just talking about. So when you are in front of your easel and you're painting, again, this goes back to like the whole like law of attraction, spiritual hokey pokey stuff that we believe in so much. So when I'm painting things that are a little bit lighter and sunnier, I try to like immerse myself mentally and spiritually into the piece. I'm wondering, almost like a method actor might do. When you're painting, are you the monster? Are you the observer of the monster? Are you something else? What role are you usually playing when you're painting?
I feel like I am the guy who is supposed to bring this thing into the world. Like, almost like there is this being. Alex Gray was interviewed for my documentary, and he said something that was so cool, and it really resonated with me. He's like, Chet, I forget how, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, Chet is like bringing these things, these kind of wounded things that need to be brought into the world. It's like, I forget. I wish I could remember how he said it, but it feels like, to me, the paint, I'm subordinate to the painting. I try and keep myself out of the painting as much as possible, like my ego.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like whatever is painting, which is this weird kind of subconscious part of my mind, it will do a better job than my conscious, intelligent part will do.
Right.
It's better than I am at art and creating meaning and stuff. If I just do it logically, it's going to be contrived and cheesy, because I've tried it and it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
It's like my what I can tap into is like a subconscious thing. So I just try and stay out of the way, and I feel like it's my job to let the painting be what the painting wants to be, and the painting tells me what it wants to be as I paint it or as I'm designing it, because I usually kind of start from a sketch and then study and all that stuff. So I don't know. I feel like that's why I'm painting this weird shit, because that's what wants to come out. And it's like, who am I to say, no, that's bad? This is, it makes me happy. It's like, I when I first started painting, I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to paint? How am I going to approach this? And I thought back to my earliest memories of creating art when I was like 5 years old. And it was like, you sat down, you drew army guys fighting, and you were going, you were like totally into it. Or you draw a truck, you'd be drawing a monster truck, and you'd go, like you were just drawing because it was fun, and you didn't have an agenda or a meaning or anything. And that was like, I felt like that was me at my most pure place. So that's how I'm going to approach the artwork now, in that same spirit, to where it's all about the process of painting and the enjoyment of doing it. And whatever comes from that is like an artifact of that experience, kind of.
Right. But there still is I think there is still a collaboration between like the non-physical form that takes on the job of the muse, that inspiration that flows through you, how you spoke about it so eloquently. There's also this guy named Chet standing there with the experience and know-how that knows, oh, here's the time I have to do this monochromatic underpainting, and here's the time I do the glazing. Like, there is some academic knowledge. There's a collaboration, right? So
that's true. That's true. But that's it's like you learn how to do that so that you can serve the painting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, these things want to be painted realistically. They want to look real. They want to be expressed in a way that's real. So I have to have my shit together and know what I'm doing in order to express that.
So what is the guidance that you tell? So I'm sure you hear from like younger artists or people just trying to delve in. Like, what is the advice you tell people that are kind of like I am trying to just explore this darker stuff. Is it just dive in, see what comes out? Is that kind of where you fall on that?
What I usually end up telling younger painters that are into dark art is learn the fundamentals of art. Really, it seems like people that come to me are already kind of into painting monsters and creating dark stuff, and that's not really even ever talked about much. It's more like, I see what you're trying to do, but I see that you don't know how lighting works,
right?
How form is. You don't know anatomy. So you need to learn these things, because you won't be able to express the idea that you want without learning these things that you don't want to do, like painting the bowl of fruit and doing the life drawing classes or whatever.
Yeah, you have to do the work, right?
So I'm always pushing the technical end, just so that they can express whatever they want at that point.
So interesting, because you just like kind of touched upon, just looking at your art, like Jay in the beginning thrusts of his career, and maybe just when bloggers were just getting started a little bit more, I remember he would get these articles that would be like, your paintings don't make any sense. I remember he had like one guy that ends up, he's actually still a supporter now, I think. But it's interesting because it's the same with you. You have to have a fundamental understanding of how the body works to make it look wrong, but have it work still, right? So it's like you have to understand how it should look for the eye to be comfortable with it being different.
Yeah, because even people that don't know can still tell if something doesn't look right.
And it feels so uncomfortable. You're not going to want to like sit with that piece.
Yeah. Jay's stuff is really like weird, and I love it. It's really like bendy and trippy, but it's like all those lines are right. They feel right. Even though he's distorting things, it feels right.
Yeah.
Because he knows what he's doing. It's same with my friend Gabe Leonard, who's a painter. He like does a lot of distortions. Like he makes like big hands that are too big, but it looks right because he knows composition and he knows line and he knows anatomy. So you have to know that stuff in order to be able to tweak it and make it your own, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I'm picturing as those words coming out of your mouth, like I picture them visually turning into italics with like dash Chet Zar after.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
So what are some things that you find yourself telling beginner or intermediate artists who want to jump to the next level? Like for me, there's similar things that people are screwing up on or could improve upon. What's your version of that, where you're like, hey, if you just do this with the mediums, or if you do this first or change that, what are some of the advice things, the little tidbits that you might give someone that you can articulate through a podcast?
A lot of people that are trying oils get really frustrated because they don't know how to use them. And I always say, just get some liquid.
Yeah.
And use that as a medium, because then your painting will dry overnight. You won't have to, people have trouble with the drying time. So, I paint kind of thin and I use liquid and it dries overnight. So it's never been a huge problem for me. And I know some people, when they don't know anything about painting, they just start painting. They get some oils and they just start painting straight out of the tube. And it's just like, this painting won't dry. And it's like 6 weeks. How am I supposed to do this? So I that's one thing I find myself saying a lot is liquid.
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of like a tried and true thing that's worked for me.
And I think with oils, people always expect it to happen quickly. Like I have a lot of people come to me that try oils and they'll say, well, I worked on this painting and it didn't come out how I wanted it. And I'm like, well, how long did you work on it? They're like, well, I worked on it like 3 hours.
Right.
And they say it as if I'm supposed to be impressed. I'm like, 3 hours. Okay. Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Just keep going for about 3 weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
Our daughter actually asked that this morning. She was like, well, how long do your paintings take? She's like, and Jay was like 30 days, sometimes 90 days. And she was like, 90 days.
That's a lifetime.
Yeah.
When you're a kid. Oh God, that's so long.
Yeah.
Chet, do you still find yourself like dabbling in areas of art, whether it's subject matter or medium, where you're completely, or not completely, but just you're not really comfortable, like where you're pushing your style, you're pushing your technique, you're doing something that isn't already at a mastery level? Do you find yourself just jumping back into the student role still, or it's just about mastery?
I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to change things up. I struggled painting. I'm not naturally like a loose painter. Like a Sargent type, where it's real big single brush strokes that you step back and they look amazing. I have to render a bit usually, and I do, and I enjoy it, and I like the way it looks. But I know at one point I wanted to learn how to paint like that, have it look good and be loose. And so for a while, and I don't know, the mid 2000s, I think I was really focusing on loose painting and struggling. And I finally was able to do it. And I painted a picture of my dog, and I painted in this loose style. And I was like, oh, okay, I did it. Now I know how to do it. And then I just went right back to painting tight again. Because that's just
your thing.
That's my natural, that's my tendency. So the other thing I do have kind of trouble with is painting like pretty women. It's like, I can do it. Like I just did a Bride of Frankenstein study the other night, which I posted on my Patreon for someone that requested that. And it's this beautiful side view of her. And, it was kind of scary. It's hard for me. It's easy for me to paint like ugly things because there's, something is fucked up looking, it works. And if, there's a weird mark, you could turn it into a wrinkle.
Right. It's okay. You have more permission.
But, beautiful things are like, you have to be very careful, and you can't, a beautiful woman's face, one thing is wrong and it looks terrible, So I did do a series of women for a show I did called Lilith, where I was kind of interpreting the Lilith myth. And she's like the first feminist. If you look up that mythology, it's all throughout the world.
Okay.
And I kind of did my version of women, but they weren't ugly. They were kind of beautiful. And that was a triumph for me. It was difficult. So I do find, beauty, and like maybe painting my grandkids would be harder than painting monsters. Painting portraits is very difficult too. It's something I'm working on.
Man, got it. When we were talking about things that kind of come up often with artists that they're maybe they should be doing differently, one of the topics that popped into my head, which I still find I'm learning things about, is color temperature. It's such a subtle shift in one type of orange to another, like literally can make or break a painting. Do you have any lessons or some advice on that for artists listening?
That's something that I only recently started thinking about, actually, like in the last couple of years, because I saw, what was it? I forgot the guy's name. Some painter.
Van Gogh?
No. Vincent.
I heard of that guy.
Did Dario or I forgot his name.
We'll look it up.
He's kind of a famous painter, but I saw this. This guy sent me this video of him teaching a class, and he was talking about like cool highlight, warm, I don't know, cool, warm, basically, where you have like a cool color, and then you got a warm color, and then you got a cool color and a warm color. And it got me thinking about color temperature, and it's so powerful. And when you start throwing in those like different temperatures of the same color, it just like makes the thing come alive.
Yeah, it creates like a vibration type of effect. And people like look at it and they don't know why it's doing that. It's very hard to like see the nuance unless you're looking for it.
Right, you might not even notice it. Again, my friend Gabe Leonard, who I'm a big fan of, he's really good at that. He has like a lot of weird color temperature shifts in his paintings. And it's like, you think in terms of, oh, this is orange, so I got to make it blue. But it's not like that, especially if you're doing, flesh tones and stuff. It's like, it's a gray orange and a gray blue. It's like the shift is so subtle. To get,
let me tell you what it's like.
Do much to shift it.
Let me tell you what it's like repainting a house with a guy who's trying to do paintings based on color temperature at the same time. It's like going to Home Depot is one of the most overwhelming experiences in days in that headspace.
Like, it's the wrong gray.
He's like, don't you see the blues in that? I'm like, no, I honestly just want to get the kitchen painted. So if we could just get to
it. Yeah.
Another question for our artist listeners. The business side of art, as we've probably alluded to many times already, it's hard as fuck, right? So finding like your own business model, there is no one business model that works, right? So like,
I know, absolutely.
I find that some artists really thrive doing the gallery thing. I personally haven't had the greatest experience with galleries. What advice or what lessons might you be able to share of like, hey, this did work for me. Hey, this totally doesn't work for me.
Let's see. I mean, I've always been on my own, just kind of figuring it out as I go. I think most artists are probably like that, unless you're rich and you went to art school and you got all these connections. Most people have to kind of figure it out for themselves. So, I mean, I don't know. I've curated shows that I thought were amazing that bombed. Like I curated a Ouija board show that was amazing, I thought, and no one bought anything.
Is that the one that was the Kickstarter? How'd that thing go?
No. This was long before that. The Kickstarter went great. It was, a show based on this book I'm doing where I mythologize all of my paintings into this other dimension called dystopia. And I'm still working. I'm like 3 years late on the book, or 2 years late on the book. Okay. And I'm working on that now. But that was, kind of a nightmare. Still kind of a nightmare, but I am getting it done.
Isn't that good that it's a nightmare?
Yeah.
Isn't that your genre?
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare in a bad
Shouldn't I
way.
say congratulations? It's a nightmare.
It's almost done. Once it's done, it's going to be incredible, but it's just taken so much longer. Let's see. It's weird. Like, again, I'm going to bring up Gabe. He got me really into prints, doing canvas giclées. He does really well with canvas giclées, and I started doing canvas giclées, and the larger ones don't sell as well for me, but the small 11x14 ones sell pretty well. So, but he sells big ones easily. Like that's a big part of his market, more than originals, I think.
Yeah,
and
for me too.
Yeah, that's our market for sure. Is the large.
Yeah,
canvas.
it's just it's different. It's like I've got a really huge fan base, but I think a lot of them are younger, and they don't have money for like $300 or $500 for a big giclée. I sell all kinds of different things. But...
By the way, do you know that giclée is actually French slang for jizz?
Oh,
is it?
Yeah,
that's nice.
I heard it was like a totally made up word by Graham Nash.
No, I actually Googled it 'cause someone told me at an art show. I'm like, really? It means like come? And I looked it up. It's like giclée, and it means something like spray or something, which alludes to like the inkjet. And,
I heard it was spray of ink or something.
Yeah.
I heard it was jizz.
That's good. Okay.
I heard it was created by Graham Nash, the guy from Crosby, Stills and Nash, because he was a photographer and he started doing these art prints on these big printers, which were proofing printers before they were commercially available. And he started calling them giclées as a fancy, or maybe he didn't invent the term, but maybe he knew it was jizz. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
right.
But he started calling them giclées to make them sound fancy because they were just these big proofing prints that advertising agencies used.
So the art model thing. So I know we've talked about this in private about some gallery situations that we've shared, but have you had good luck with galleries, or does it always seem to be challenging to chase people for money and deal with the other things?
Yeah. No, when it comes to that, I've had good luck with galleries, but that's because I've only shown for the most part shown in galleries that are, cool people that I trust. Like Copro is always, there's none of that not paying you. They pay right away and they're honest. Last Rites Gallery, they're just very professional.
Cool.
I don't do a ton of gallery shows. I usually do one solo show a year, and I've stopped doing group shows as often as I can, unless a friend of mine is curating one or it's a really cool theme or whatever. But that's part of, themed group shows I stopped doing unless it's something I would normally do, because when you do something outside of what people expect of you, like if I did a Star Wars thing, it might sell, but if it doesn't sell, then I'm stuck with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And just group shows in general, it's like, how I can't take the time to make a painting for you and not have a guaranteed payment.
Right.
This doesn't make sense at this point because I could sell this stuff myself. So when it comes to like maybe a smaller gallery that wants to capitalize on my name for being in their show. I usually like, it's not worth it for me, but I will sell it to you wholesale.
Right.
And it's smart. It's smart actually for a gallery to do that because, they'll probably spend that much in advertising. And if they have like a big name they can promote, it's almost like a form of advertising. Plus they can sell the painting and make a profit and get their money back and make a profit. So that's what I've been doing lately with group shows.
That's the best experiences I've had. I have a gallery in Australia that buys stuff at like a wholesale rate, and they've been supporting me for a number of years. And it is hard for a gallery to do that, but if they have their shit together, and they know what they're doing and they have their demographic figured out, it works out, best for both parties.
Right. Yeah. That's hard for a gallery to do. So I don't expect it too often though. But I'm actually very sympathetic to galleries because I've curated shows and I know how hard it is to run a gallery.
Yeah.
So I'm not as, I don't hate on galleries like a lot of artists do, but, the things are changing for sure. The galleries need to kind of figure out a new way of doing business because
for sure
it's not working out well for them.
It's a hard freaking business. And I didn't have as much empathy until we opened up a gallery a few years ago and then had to close it because it was just so incredibly different.
Yeah. It's insane.
I would like to know, Chet, so do you have like a painting or a painting series in your head that you're like, someday when the money is just like overflowing, is there a scenario where you have so much money you're like, I could paint whatever I want, and the day that comes, I'm going to paint this? Like, are there things that you would love to just paint a 12-foot wide canvas of like something totally different? Like,
yeah, that's it. That's what I was going to say is I want to paint a huge painting that I've never done anything above, I think 3 by 4 foot, as big as I've gone, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do like a 6 by 8 foot or something like that. And
would it still be the same subject matter, the same style if money had nothing to do with it?
I see no reason to change. I just am so happy doing what I'm doing.
Cool.
It's so much fun. I wouldn't change it. I might want to paint. I really love pit bulls. I've become a huge pit bull advocate, and I would like to paint pit bulls. That might be something fun. So I could see painting more just for the fun of it, doing a series of pit bulls or dogs or something. I want to paint my grandkids and stuff. That would be kind of normal.
not like zombie versions of your grandkids.
Yeah. It's challenging for me to do likenesses and portraits. So sometimes people ask me to make them into a zombie, and I really try and steer them towards, let me just do a regular portrait of you because it's more challenging and it'll, I kind of would rather do that than turn you into a monster.
Yeah.
You're like, please turn me into a monster.
Yeah. So funny.
Yeah.
Well, so this has been amazing, Chet, and I feel very grateful we got all this insight. It's like a very cool world to not understand anything about and hear someone that is so positive about it.
I love it,
yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. I had fun.
So we asked we asked one last question, and then we're going to put all your social and stuff like that out there. So we always ask every guest, just if I had to drop you back in your childhood kitchen outside of caveman masks, what is your first memory that comes to mind?
I think drawing a turtle.
All right.
Okay.
I like that.
It was like, I remember it. It was like a top view of a turtle. So I drew like the shell and I drew the legs and the head. I was
God,
3 years old.
At 3?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that's my oldest memory.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have another quick one. So I know in my career, I've been fortunate enough to get introduced to or have cool opportunities with people that I might not normally have come across, whether they be rock stars or influential people of some sort. Are there things or people in your life that were just maybe on the top, 3 list of your memories of like, wow, this is so cool that I'm hanging out with so-and-so, or I got to do such and such?
Yeah. Working with Tool was one of them. That was amazing, working on those epic Tool videos, the band Tool. Working with Clive Barker was another one, going to his house for a meeting about a film we worked on with him, because I was a huge fan of Clive Barker. And then probably working with Guillermo del Toro.
Wow.
Yeah,
so
those
cool.
are 3 big ones for me.
And where can everyone find you? Here's the time for your plugs: social media and websites and stuff you're selling and all that good stuff.
Info,
Podcast.
Yeah. Okay. On Instagram, I'm at Chet Zar, ChetZar, one word. And let's see, I have a podcast called the Dark Art Society where every week I interview a new dark artist. And that is at darkartsociety.com. And I have a Patreon where I'm teaching everything I know about artwork and how to create art, how I do it. And that is patreon.com/Chet Zar. Again, one word, ChetZar. And then there's also a Patreon for the Dark Art Society podcast that if you're into that podcast, you can support it for just $1 a month. And that is patreon.com/Dark Art Society.
Awesome.
I think that's it.
And
and chetzar.com. I'm building a website soon.
And then what is the documentary? Because I don't think we mentioned much about that.
It's called Chet Zar, I Like to Paint Monsters. We kickstarted it. Mike Carell directed it, and he wanted to make a documentary about me, and it ended up kind of being about me and then being about the dark art community really towards the end and what dark art means. Just it sort of naturally went that way, and that kind of inspired the whole idea of the Dark Art Society and the podcast, and everything came from this film. And you can get that on Amazon. It's on iTunes for rent in HD. You can get it on DVD on Amazon, and also my web store, which I should have mentioned also, which is chetzar.bigcartel.com. And I have that for sale, signed copies of that, as well as my book, Black Magic, The Art of Chet Zar, and then all kinds of prints and resin castings.
Man, Chet, this has been awesome. I'm like really psyched that we got to chat. One of the bigger compliments that I get is when I meet people that are completely in an area that I wouldn't expect them to know my art. I'll meet someone in like Iowa and they're like, I don't know anything about surfing. I'm not into beaches, but I just like your art. And I feel like I'm going to give you that sort of compliment where I'm not into monsters or horror movies in the slightest bit, but I love your art. And now that I've gotten to know you, I like love everything you're saying, and especially that you're a vegan and an animal lover.
Yeah.
And so, dude, thank you.
That's what I try to do with the artwork, is to kind of elevate it to where anybody can appreciate it because it's painted beautifully.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's sort of elevated out of what it's been relegated to, which is like this kind of ghetto of art. Isn't that kind of funny with art? Like with music, you don't have that. Like I know. With music, it's like you like the artist, you like the sound. It doesn't matter if one song is about a monster and the other song's about a teddy bear. You just like the sound and you like the artist. But with the visual arts, it's so much more about the actual subject matter, which is sort of weird that we get like compartmentalized into these little boxes. Yeah, but I think it's changing. It's really what we're trying to do, is sort of educate people on what dark art means and why it's okay to like it. Right. And you don't have to feel weird about liking it. It doesn't mean you're a freak or a weirdo.
I like freaks and weirdos.
Well, in a bad way.
Yeah. Right on, man. Well, dude, thank you so much, man.
This was awesome, Chet. Thank you. So I am a little bit shocked with this interview. I feel like I had so many preconceived judgments, like a lot. And I didn't even know
he was going to be like Ted Bundy or something?
Yeah, like a little crazy.
Like dark. I didn't really know him. I didn't know him at all, except for like some exchanges on email and social media. But I didn't know what to expect either until I kind of dove into some interviews before we talked to him, and I saw, he sounds kind of like a normal, non-monstery type guy. Yeah,
well, so that's something people should probably know about this podcast, is sometimes Jay books people, and I don't do a lot of I don't know a lot about them until about an hour ahead. Yeah, and so I have to do some crash course studying, and I didn't know.
Where I'm the opposite. I'm
Jay likes to over-prepare.
I walk in with a clipboard with 4 pages.
Yeah. I find I'm better off the cuff. If I overthink it, I get really stressed out. But with Chet, it was all I looked at was his art. So I was like, oh, fuck, what are we getting ourselves into?
You're like, I don't know anything about bats and ghouls.
Well, yeah. And you're like, oh, he was on the set of The Ring and Hellboy. And he knows how to do all those special effects, the makeup. And I was like, that sounds terrifying. And then to talk to him, it makes so much sense. And he talks about his community is actually a lot of people that this is how they find happiness, is actually their outlet.
Yeah, that was shocking for me. Because for me, I would think that if I dwelled on monsters and scary stuff in general,
it triggers
for me, it does definitely trigger some bad stuff. It pulls out my depression more. I start finding myself with anxiety because the way I personally paint, I kind of dive into the mode or the the subject matter as if I'm in the painting almost.
It's like too empathetic,
like a method acting type way of painting, which is
yeah.
not like good or bad. Well, maybe it's bad, but that's how I paint. So I feel, for me, painting ghouls would probably not react well with me, which is why I was shocked to hear that he finds happiness in it.
Right. I mean, I'm not shocked to hear that he finds happiness, because that makes sense to me.
You know what I mean.
But is happy while doing it. Yeah, like
right.
It's like, okay, this is
like it's a happy place.
It's a positive thing, yeah. Which is amazing. And if you guys like take a look, like really look at his paintings, he is ridiculously talented. Like that's the crazy thing, is you're just like, if he did anything, like anything he had chosen to paint, he could have painted it in such a detailed way. And you can really see the like makeup special effects thing coming through, like what he learned, the layering and that, and the coloring.
Could you imagine being able to do that stuff? Like the amount of practical jokes you can play on people.
Oh my gosh, I know. Well,
like
he was like saying he had like
have like
checks on his
severed
mom
body
that
parts.
there was like pencils through his hand or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so funny.
Like the amount of prosthetic penises you can make and just do weird things.
Oh my god. God, did you see in the news yesterday that
I don't watch the news.
They just said that scientists have
made
now
prosthetic
spent
penises
over like. No, the opposite. They'd spent, it was like
What's
they
the
spent over
opposite of a prosthetic penis?
800 hours getting blowjobs from robots to like perfect this
Where
robot.
do you sign up for that?
That's like, Jesus.
Really?
Yeah. Like picturing like what that lab looks like.
What the ad must have looked like. Wanted 18 through 45-year-old men who enjoy blowjobs
and also are
from robots.
Yeah.
And have fetishes with mechanical creatures.
Is that ridiculous? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, how did I miss that?
I want to know what part of our science money is going towards these things. But I'm sure
That's
there's some
bizarre.
billionaire that was like, we're going to make a shitload of money doing this, so let's figure it out.
Wow. Yeah, like you figure Chet could have made that robot look like anything.
Right? There you go. You're like, do you want a zombie blowjob? Sorry, this like took a weird turn.
That's
anyway.
Okay. What was cool about it is, so his technique is interesting because like from an art standpoint, it's like very much like chiaroscuro paintings where it's like the light and darks are really contrasted.
Yeah.
Almost like a Renaissance thing. And it's interesting because if you look at it, some of his paintings look like they're very colorful, but in essence, they're very grayed out. Like there's a lot of like neutral, like gray tones. And then he uses these like bright, vivid, like oranges and yellows. And it's like, it feels like it's to pop it out. And I love how he kind of plays with light. And that really like lends to his style and his ability to kind of keep cranking out paintings. Because most of it is like, a lot of it is like underpaintings and like these gray tones. And so I like I find that really interesting.
The origination of like doing pencil sketches, like the fade, like shading and all that, and then bringing it to the like the tonal, layering it over. Yeah,
like the values have a lot to do with it. I was also like, I was kind of surprised, or not surprised, wrong word. I was pleased to hear that he knew my friend from high school.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I
and
have
he
to reach
did say
out to
that's
him.
a really small community. I know that's how it is with my brother too. Like if anyone's doing sound,
what's
in
the
Hollywood,
chances of like someone ending up in that field that was 2 blocks from my house that I used to skate launch ramps with?
Your high school is like a weird thing like that. There's a lot of people from your school that
there are a pretty good amount of really talented people.
Yeah, it's really
funny. My world.
There's a reason it's now the arts high school. They just like saw it happening.
Which I actually went to my old high school. Shout out to Howell High School in Farmingdale, New Jersey. I went there yesterday to donate some old art supplies and art prints for an auction they're having tonight. So that was pretty cool. I brought Judah, which was awesome to share my old
that trip took so long.
Hangout with my little son.
That's cool.
Everyone looked like they're 12.
I know.
I don't remember looking like I was 12.
No, you know what
18.
really aged me is like the fact that the first year residents, when they graduate in July, like these are doctors and they're coming in and I'm like, I'm 10 years, 15 years.
I would like to take
older
Chet's skills and make prosthetics, make me look like I'm 15 years younger.
Oh, okay. I think he's probably better at making it go the other way.
Probably.
He did say like, and that's funny. Like he's not the first artist I've heard that like painting beauty is intimidating. Like it's
that is interesting because I feel it's not surprising for me to hear, but I feel like most people assume that if you're an artist, especially a good artist, you not even that you could just paint anything.
Right.
Yeah. And there's so many artists that are very well known in different genres that they can't paint a face or they can't paint whatever it might be. Like even Lou Carbone, that I'm like, I love him. He's one of my former teachers. Like he avoids painting faces for sort of the same reason. And it's like, it's interesting because there's so many great artists that just can't do certain things.
Right. And some that only do faces and the scenes are very intimidating. I know. It's really interesting.
It's like that with other genres too. Like you feel like if you pick up a guitar, that if you can't play a certain kind of song, you just suck. But sometimes people are just meant, like Paula. She plays the ukulele amazingly.
But she's afraid to play anything else.
But she doesn't really play intricate stuff. She can't really play guitar. So It's interesting when you kind of just dive into one thing.
And you find your one thing. Like, that's all you need.
Right.
That's fulfilling enough.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you love this one. Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day, everyone.
Thanks, guys. We hope you loved that episode. If you did love it and could give us some love on iTunes, that would be amazing. You can leave a review and we will give you a shout out at some point on this podcast.
Also, if you guys can follow us on social media, we would love to hear from you. We are on pretty much every social media platform at Shifting Perceptions Podcast, which is the same as our website, shiftingperceptionspodcast.com. We look and reply to all comments, so please share with your friends, tag us. We appreciate all the love.
And don't forget that all of our guests also see all these comments, so I'm sure if you want to just have a space you can reach out, these are the places to do it. We also want to give some love to our amazing photographer that has done all of our photos so far,
Kevin Rigby.
His website is wavelightstudio.com.
And also our really good friend John Harvey, who did the music for our podcast. You can find him at Instagram at Harvey Wallbanger. So that's our little rolling credits. We will be back next week.